Hello everybody and welcome to the Sheff United Way for what is quite a difficult video and definitely quite a difficult discussion. Now, there is a debate raging currently between Sheffield United fans about the future of manager 𝗂𝗍𝗶𝗏𝗏. Will he be able to continue as manager? And actually, I think some people are asking the question, should he be able to continue as manager? The case for the defence. Now, let's be honest, he's earned the chance to get some patience from the Sheffield United board and from the Sheffield United fans. From day one that he joined Sheffield United, let's be frank about it, Heckingbottom has been a little bit undermined by the ownership, by everything else that is going on at the club. Now, there is an ongoing crisis just bubbling under the surface at Sheffield United, which is that we are looking for new ownership. Is now the right time to make a change? With a potential new owner coming in, will they want to bring their own man? Is there a potential new owner anywhere in sight? And if not, can our current owner afford to make this change? Do we have the money? Do we have the finances to be able to move on a manager who joined us on a 5-year deal 2.5 years ago? Now, that is a really important question. And obviously, the finances will play a huge part, I'm sure, in any potential decision that is being made by our current ownership scheme. But back to Heckingbottom and the work that he's done with all that as a backlog. And I think everybody would agree, particularly last season, what he did was fantastic. Now, Sheffield United had a transfer embargo. We had very few players coming through the door at all. I think in Heckingbottom's time up to the promotion last season, he'd only been able to spend money on one player. That was 𝗂𝗍𝗶𝗏𝗏𝗏, which was a fantastic purchase. But he managed to get Sheffield United promoted despite all of that. Now, we did have a squad that was more than capable of competing, and that should have been in the promotion conversation, don't get me wrong. But to be able to keep the players focused, to overcome all of that off-field anxiety, to overcome the embargo, to navigate all of that pressure, he deserves immense, immense credit. And of course, what was his reward for getting through all of that pressure, to get through all of those problems? It was to have 2 of his key players from that promotion team sold out from under him. On the eve of a new season, he's going into the Premier League and he has to do that with an arm tied behind his back because we didn't have any money to make new signings in the first place. To then lose 2 of his key players, I'm sure was a huge blow to his plans for this season. And of course, that then bleeds into the results that we've seen. Now, generally speaking, there's 2 sides to this, but I'll cover one side of it now. For about half of our games so far, Sheffield United have been competitive. We have been able to stand up, to be countered. We have not been blown away. And we have played some very good teams and been able to hold them and almost do better in terms of getting results out of those games. I'm, of course, talking about Manchester City at Bramall Lane, where it's a very, very late goal that has beaten us. I'm talking about Nottingham Forest away, where it is a very, very late goal that's beaten us. I'm talking about Spurs, where it is 2 very, very late goals that have beaten us when we were within moments of getting what would have been an unbelievable victory, and that would completely change the complexion of how we're looking at the season at the moment. I'm also talking about Everton at Bramall Lane. That wasn't a vintage performance, but Jordan Pickford had to make an absolute wonder save in the 96th minute to stop us getting all 3 points there. So I've already listed games where if we'd got 3-4 points from those games, would we be having this conversation? No, I don't think we would, because I think those performances had probably given us enough confidence. And bearing in mind the context that Heckingbottom has been doing that in itself is a huge positive and a huge case for the defence and a huge case for why he should continue to be Sheffield United manager. But it's not the only one, because there are lots of other things to consider when changing a manager. And one of them, of course, is consistency and the long-term plan for what Sheffield United are trying to achieve. 𝗂𝗍𝗶𝗏𝗏𝗏 came in with a long-term plan in mind. He was given a 5-year contract and he was intended to see that out. And it would see United transition into a team that buy young players fairly cheap and turn them into players better so that we can sell them on for profit and keep the system going. Now, what Heckingbottom brings to that is that he's worked, obviously, with young players quite consistently through his career, but particularly at United. You look at the change in 𝗟𝗻𝗄𝐻𝐺 from when Heckingbottom joined to where he was when 𝗟𝐺 left the club. We also look at his time with the academy and the under-21s, and he's obviously got a pedigree of working with young players. So if we want a manager who is going to deliver our long-term vision of working with young players and making them better, maybe Paul Heckingbottom is the man to be able to do that. I also reference consistency, and Paul Heckingbottom coaches in what many people might refer to as the Sheff United way. And he does that by building on what had been so successful under Chris Wilder. We play the same 3-5-2 system. It shifted a little bit. And again, we will come to this later in the video. But he's also proven that by managing that way, by coaching in this system, he can get Sheffield United promoted from the Championship. And if relegation is on the cards, as I think we all are now accepting it probably is, then Paul Heckingbottom may well be the best option to bring Sheffield United back to the Premier League and maybe to bring us back in a better place. There's also one final question that we all have to consider when looking at a change of manager, and that is, of course, who would come in next? There aren't that many managers out there knocking on the door who you think, yeah, he'd be perfect. He's not got a club at the moment. Let's have him in at Sheffield United. There's also the question of if you're a young up-and-coming manager. Now, I'll get this out there immediately. Lots of United fans might say, if we change manager, we should get Kieran McKenna from Ipswich. There is not a cat in hell's chance that that would ever happen, because that's just not realistic. He's a manager on the up who's doing very successfully with a club in the Championship. Why would a manager of that pedigree come to Sheffield United right now? The risk that you've got to your CV is a likely promotion and a potential points disaster that we might all have to sort of come to terms with if this change went wrong. I think we all agree we wouldn't want one of these stopgap managers, an Allardyce, somebody like that who comes in, gives you 6 months, you get relegated anyway, it's rubbish to watch, and there's very little improvement, but it also means throwing any long-term planning out of the window. So there's some key facets there that we have to consider in making this decision, and a few of them go in Heckingbottom's favour. His patience and his reputation and what he's already done at the club, the lack of other options out there, and the long-term consistency and planning that having him in place brings to Sheffield United. But now we do have to move on to the second half of this video. We've gone over some fantastic reasons that Heckingbottom should stay at Sheffield United, but now we do have to cover off some of the reasons why it might be time for Sheffield United to make a change and for him to move on. It's not nice, but we do have to start this conversation and understand why people are feeling that Heckingbottom should no longer be the manager of Sheffield United. Now, I addressed in the first half of this video that we had our legs cut out from under us in the summer, but we have 1 point from 10 games of football. We have seen embarrassing performances, such as being annihilated 8-0 at home. This isn't an away game where we've gone to one of the big boys. Newcastle came to Bramall Lane, and to be honest, they just walked through us with so much ease that it was really quite pathetic. We then followed that up with a completely nothing performance at West Ham and at Fulham, where we never laid a glove on either club. And Fulham in particular was a team that we should have been targeting. I'm not going to talk about the early season games, the Palace, the Forest, because I don't think that's fair, because I do think that the impact of the summer was too great and too soon for those 2 games to be considered. But we were quite a way into the season. We'd got the new signings in, and the performances against Newcastle, West Ham, Fulham were not good enough. We then come to the weekend and, Arsenal away. We're not judging anybody on what happens at Arsenal away, but to lose 5-0, to concede yet again more goals after the 75th minute, I think it's 10 for the season that we've conceded in that last quarter of an hour, that's a real problem. And I think that points to a coaching issue where we don't have the fitness and we don't have the sort of mental fortitude to be able to keep going for 90 minutes. The goals conceded against Arsenal also meant that we've conceded 10 goals already from set pieces this season. And that is all tactics. That is all defensive management and planning. The coaching staff are clearly not preparing the defenders properly, or the attackers, or the midfielders for how we try and defend corners and set pieces coming into our box. There are clear performance issues and tactical issues that are affecting Sheffield United right now. And unfortunately, that does come at the manager's door, and it becomes the manager's responsibility. But that flows quite nicely for me into my next point, and another reason that I think it might be the right decision for Sheffield United's board to make a change. And that is, I think it's time for a fresh start. Because I addressed there that we've got 1 point from 10 games. The only other club in history to have got 1 point from 10 Premier League games is Sheffield United under Chris Wilder last time. Now, I like Heckingbottom, and this is meant with no disrespect, but Heckingbottom is an extension of the Chris Wilder development of Sheffield United. He is playing the same system, and if I'm being brutally frank, which I think it's only fair that I am, I think it's a less well-coached, less tactically astute system that we play now compared to what it was under Chris Wilder. I think during our time in the Championship, we relied on individual brilliance from 𝗜ļiman and 𝐍𝐸 to really make a difference in tight games. We no longer see the overloads being developed on the wings. We no longer see clear, intricate tactical plans that are coming through in set pieces or that are coming through in terms of our general play and build-up. We're no longer slow and patient, but we're also not fast and dynamic. What we have is a real hybrid that relies on somebody doing something really special. As we've stepped into the Premier League, you can see that more obviously than ever before because we no longer have that individual ability. And so what we're seeing is the lack of a plan to get us forward is completely limiting our opportunities to be able to break teams down. And so we're under pressure, and we've got no get-out-of-jail-free card in 𝗜ļiman and 𝐍𝐸. And so I think it's time for a fresh start. I don't think we want Wilder anymore. I'll be clear on that. We'll come to it later in the video, but I don't want Chris Wilder. But I also don't think that this system is working anymore. I think clearly it's been found out at the elite level. I don't think it will work for a club trying to develop themselves in the Premier League. And I think we've seen that from the last 2 times that we've tried it. So I think it's time for a fresh start. Somebody to come in with new ideas, to change what Sheffield United are doing, and hopefully give us a brighter shot at that long-term future that we want. We can keep to the same plan in theory. I'm not against the idea of Heckingbottom staying at the club to try and help us drive that plan going forwards, but I do think it needs somebody new with fresh ideas tactically to try and get Sheffield United into a position where they can perform better than the sum of their parts, which quite clearly we are not doing at the moment. And so we come back to that question of who would be the man to bring about a fresh start at Sheffield United. I made it clear in that last answer that man should not be Chris Wilder. For me, I don't believe there's any reason to make that change. I think if we're going from Heckingbottom to Wilder, we should keep Heckingbottom. I think he's currently in with the squad. And I think given that they play such a similar tactical system, I might think that Wilder is a better manager than Heckingbottom. But that doesn't mean that it's the right idea to make that change right now. If we're making this change, we need to do so for a manager who would jump at the opportunity to manage Sheffield United and who might give us a shot at, when we do get relegated, coming back as a better team with a new system. I would be looking at young managers or managers who have already done pretty stellar jobs in the EFL. That's only me because that's where my knowledge base lies. I'd be looking at Luke Williams at Notts County. I'd be looking at Steven Schumacher at Plymouth. I'd be considering managers who have been around a little bit longer, 𝗂𝗓𝗏 at West Brom. Even Mark Robins at Coventry has done a great job under quite difficult financial circumstances, which is exactly what we would be needing from a manager at Sheffield United. So I do believe there are options out there, and I believe they are options who would jump at the chance to manage a club who are going to have parachute payments, who are currently a Premier League team, and who will give you a chance at a promotion to the Premier League on your CV. I think you take the relegation to try and get the promotion. And so for me, there are options out there that I do think give us a slight chance to be a team that comes back. The final thing that I haven't addressed in either, I don't think this is for Heckingbottom. I'm not sure it's against him either. I do not know what is to blame, but we have to address it in a video like this because it's such a huge part of why we're having this conversation. Of course, it's the injury record. Now, it's been quite ridiculous how many injuries Sheffield United have experienced in the last 2 years, last 3 years even, going back to COVID-19 and the stoppage in play that we saw during that. And I think clearly that has an impact on performance and it has an impact on why Sheffield United have had such a bad start to the season. It's not all tactics. It's not all something that the manager could have controlled because some of these freak injuries have had a massive effect on what we've been able to do. They have taken away all of our squad depth. Maybe if we had more squad depth, we'd be able to play to the 90th minute because we'd have players coming off the bench able to make an impact that aren't such a dramatic step down from what we had before. Maybe our first 11 would be better, so we'd be more competitive and we'd actually be able to impose ourselves on games. We'd have more individual quality to allow us to deliver the system the way that Heckingbottom wants it to be played. But on the other side of that, there's a growing group of people who are talking on the internet about whether or not some of these injuries are Heckingbottom's fault. Maybe it's coming from the work that we're doing in training. Maybe it's coming from overwork for some of the individuals. Maybe it's coming from us not having the right physio staff. I do not know the answers, and I won't pretend that I do. That's the reason I've not addressed it. I thought it was worth flagging it up here because it has such an impact on both of those ways of thinking. But I don't know who's to blame. I don't know if you can put any blame at all on the manager. I don't know if you should blame all of it on the manager. I do not understand the situation or what's causing it. And so I don't think it's right that I assign blame to anybody at this stage. Until we know more, maybe we will, maybe we won't. So going through all of that analysis, I have to admit, I believe it is time for something new at Sheffield United. I think we need a fresh voice. I think we need a fresh start. And I think that will actually allow us to come back a better team. Because if we stay the same, and if we say that Heckingbottom or Wilder are the person who should take Sheffield United down and bring us back up, I think we'll be in this exact same position the next time we're in the Premier League. Because we've already seen it twice. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So for me, it's time for a change. It's time for a new Sheffield United way. And it's time for us to really start looking at what that future looks like with an exciting young manager who has the patience and has the time to get relegated, but also the patience and the time to be the man who brings us back better than we are right now. But that's just my opinion, and we do want to hear from you. And I want to make sure I just reinforce what I said at the start. We do want to hear from you. We're really keen to hear the fans' voice because we want to be representing what the fans want. You know, we want this channel to be for the fans and by fans. I'm a huge Sheffield United fan, and I have been since I was 5 years old and I could actually think about football for the first time, you know, and whatever happens, whoever's the manager, whoever's in charge, we should all be getting behind the club and doing everything that we can to help us get as many points as possible. Apparently, get as many points as possible, because what really matters is that Sheffield United start winning games. And I want to be wrong. I want that if nothing changes, Heckingbottom's the manager, we beat Wolves, we beat Bournemouth, and I look like an absolute fool on this video. That'd be the best outcome for me, because it would mean that Sheffield United are winning. But tell us your opinion in the comments. Let us know if you think this was a decent video. Let us know if you completely disagree with everything that I've said, or if you at least respect me but still think I'm an idiot. So just let us know what you think. We're really keen to hear from you fans, and we're really keen to ensure that whatever happens, we're all still Blades, aren't we? Thank you very much, Unitedites. Up the Blades.